Good morning. Continuing with Niaga AWANI with me, Ibrahim Sania. I'm taking over from my colleagues Najib Aruf, Nina Rosman, as well as Harith Sachaf Hasnan. We move on to our first story for the day when it comes to the economy. Fitch Solutions have revised Malaysia's growth forecast to 5.9% for 2022 from a previous estimate of 5.2% in response to better than expected economy following the 8.9% year-on-year growth reported for the second quarter of this year. However, it expects that the country's economic expansion to slow down in the second half as pent-up demand eases. We need to discuss this a little bit more with some of the folks that are particularly familiar with this. Joining us is Dr. Tricia Yeoh, the CEO of Ideas. Tricia, good morning.
Hi, morning. Good morning.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about what you think about the concept of the economy possibly heating up and resulting in inflation rate being further exacerbated for this.
Yeah, so thanks for having me this morning. I think the Fitch Solutions report that just came out basically quite accurately captures the economic situation in Malaysia. We already know, for example, that we have been experiencing increases in our food prices. The food prices actually, food and beverages are the main contributors to the rise in inflation throughout the month of June, based on the statistics that have been released by the Department of Statistics Malaysia. And so it does not quite come as a surprise. I think the food inflation has taken place, especially post-pandemic. Things did not recover due to the supply chain issues. And then following that, of course, the advance of the Russia-Ukraine war, especially with regards to wheat prices, animal feed, energy prices, oil and gas, and so on. So all of these are contributing to the inflation rates as they are today. Whether or not this heats up, as Fitch predicts, in the second half of the year it remains to be seen. But I think given the situation in which the government is also struggling with the fiscal debt issue, it has these pressures that have been built up over the last decade already. What the government can actually do to manage a situation of hyperinflation, we don't have that yet, but what may come in the future, that really is dependent on how the government balances its public debt situation.
Okay. There's also the concept of us looking at the statement coming in from the Finance Minister, Zafrul, last week, or I think 2 weeks ago, where he said that the absence of, say, subsidies would possibly increase inflation rate to go up as high as 13%. While most of the economists in the country would agree that this would be the case, there still seems to be a whole host of issues, particularly when it comes to the plan to reduce subsidy over the long term. What would be some of your ideas when it comes to subsidy reduction over the longer period right now?
I think we've had this discussion for a really long time. This focus on targeted subsidies, this conversation has come in and out. This is prior even to the pandemic, and the situation over the last 2 years has exacerbated these trends. But even prior to that, the country has always had this tension between implementing a more targeted version of the subsidies that we currently enjoy versus what happens today, where the government spends billions on subsidies every year. And the problem with a blanket subsidy system is that everyone enjoys this regardless of what the income bracket is. And if we really need to target the poorer households, let's not even talk about the bottom 40, because I think because of the pandemic and the food inflation and so on, we are possibly even talking about what is now called like a B50, right? Or even a 60, because the bottom 50 to 60% of Malaysians are actually just not earning enough to make ends meet on a monthly basis. So in that sense, if we can move away from a blanket subsidy system to ensure that a larger proportion of those who really need the subsidies can enjoy that, that would be ideal. So what does that entail, right? So we're talking about the basic food products. We're talking about petrol. I mean, it's been a really long time since we've already talked about different methods and means of ensuring that the smaller cars with the lower CC would be receiving cheaper petrol rates compared to others who are driving luxury cars. And I mean, the fact that we just don't have differentiated prices for this already tells you something about how it's actually unfair. So in the long run, I mean, if both the government and society can realize that moving towards targeted subsidies would be beneficial for the country as a whole, I think that really would be ideal. The problem, of course, is that we are also in an election season heading towards the general election sometime over the next 1 year. And ideally, any government that wants to make these very difficult measures to tighten the belt would need to do it when they are in a sort of more political stable situation, which is not the case currently. So I think we have a couple of very difficult crises at the moment where you have a twin sort of public debt situation as well as an increasing household debt situation. So with these two, twin problems taking place at the same time, we understand that the Ministry of Finance is also in a difficult position because while it wants to engage in fiscal consolidation, which is what it said it would do when it released its pre-budget statement 2023, which is the second time that it has done that, and we applaud them for that. So there are plans for that, but whether or not they can withstand the political pressures, the pressures from, society as a whole. I mean, we understand that unemployment has not been restored, or rather rates have not been restored to the pre-pandemic level. So we do understand the difficult situation for everyone at hand, but the longer we delay this, the longer we actually can come to some kind of solution, and then you will start to see rating agencies having to perhaps, make these difficult statements for Malaysia.
Yeah. Also, Ideas has urged Food Trajaya to reform public procurement by introducing a Government Procurement Act, and this comes in the wake of the Littoral Combat Ship scandal. After PAC, Public Accounts Committee Chairman YB Wong Kah-Wah revealed that not a single ship has been completed. What do you think about this whole notion of having a Procurement Act following this, not just this recent scandal, but many other scandals, particularly involving the Defence Ministry?
Yeah, the Procurement Act is long overdue. It's actually contained within the government plans itself, so it's not something that we plucked out of thin air. It's actually in the plan within government. This has been in the National Anti-Corruption Plan from several years ago by the PH administration, which was, by the way, adopted by the current administration as well. So it's there. We just need to expedite it. And as you say, the case of the Littoral Combat Ship, it just is one in another of series of poor procurement from the government. And this is why public procurement reforms are really crucial. The Act would allow us to include some new regulatory measures. It would strengthen compliance and governance in public procurement. It would reduce the abuse of direct negotiation. And this GPA, if it is modeled after international procurement legislation, such as the UN Citral Model Law on the Model Law on Public Procurement, this would really send a great signal internationally as well, because it would say that Malaysia is willing to play the same game as the international standards have. We really urge this to take place. If not, you're going to see more and more of these procurement problems. So not just narrowly focused on this specific case, but more broadly on general public procurement. Just to also say that specifically in defense, because this case is with regards to defense, Malaysia is actually ranked in the Band D in the Government Defense Integrity, or the GDI Index 2020. So that's actually indicative of quite a high risk of corruption in defense procurement. We know that defense spending can really balloon just because of the nature of the procurement, the kinds of equipment that needs to be purchased. So this recent revelation was really quite telling of how things take place. And connected to the the earlier conversation that we were having about the economy being at risk at the moment, I think it really is the right time for people and the government itself. This is going to help the government in terms of its public funds. If we say that we have to, change our subsidy system in order to afford greater number of cash handouts, where we're going to get those funds. So this means that every ringgit counts. And if we can reform the procurement that's done and save billions of ringgit, all of that billions of ringgit, let's not even talk about billions. Let's talk about the 400,000 ringgit that was for this mast that was not even necessary in the first place, right? That was installed just for the launching of the warship. How many nasi lemaks can you buy to feed the poorer communities with 400,000 ringgit? So, and then you upscale that to the billions, right? So I think it really is the right time to talk about how government can save its money and what great amount of help we can do with this amount of saved money. It really is about the public debt situation. It's about, fiscal consolidation. It's about how the government, together with the people and society who can understand the situation, put their hands together and appreciate that reforms are really necessary and that corruption or reducing corruption can lead to better outcomes for people, more money in the pocket. So there's a direct relationship between economics and corruption.
Thank you very much, Tricia. That was Dr. Tricia Yeoh, the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs, or IDEAS. We're going to move on to some news on the local bourse. Early trading has shown quite a slight jump in terms of the slow trading period that we've seen over the past few weeks. As at 9:56 a.m. on a beautiful Tuesday, 16th August morning, the KLCI is up to 1,511 points, up by 7 points or 49%. Over 650 million shares are done with valued at about 350 million ringgit. Gainers are outshining losers with 298 counters in the green while 209 counters are in the red. Some stock picks that we can particularly talk about is, of course, the banking sector. CIMB is looking at consolidating some of their digital offerings. In the meantime, CIMB also introduces Malaysia's first auto dealer app for vehicle financing, partners with Carsem to accelerate the rollout. And of course, some of the conversation includes how CIMB is going to leverage on the partnership with Ant Financial in rolling out their Touch and Go or TNG digital. So a lot of news there. CIMB is up 2 cents to 5 ringgit 45 cents. Burma's Auto is also in the news. Sales are expected to remain robust through financial year 2023. UOB Kay Hian argues that this is due to strong order backlog to date. UOB Kay Hian places a hold on Burma's Auto with a higher target price on higher sales volume assumption. There's also some talk on how the auto industry might be looking at consolidating their digital offering and perhaps enjoy some of the benefits that might be offered in the upcoming budget. So Burma's Auto or B Auto this morning is at up 1 cent to 1 ringgit 81 cent. Also, Maybank has appointed Dr. Siu Chan Cheong as its Group Chief Strategy Officer effective 15th August this year. Dr. Siu will be responsible for developing and executing strategies for the group. He will assist and report to the Group President and CEO of Maybank and work closely with the board and the leadership team. He will also be responsible for for broadening and deepening the digitization and digitalization agenda for the bank and driving the industrialization and adoption of analytics across the group to achieve business goals. This is very important because Maybank has not filed or did not file for the digital offering, but they have been offering digital services for the longest of time, talking over 2 decades already. So they are in the business already, even without applying for the digital license. So there's a lot of conversation that needs to take place when it comes to digitization and bank. All right, so that's some of the ideas that we can take on this. That's all that we have for you this morning. I wish you all the best and have a great week ahead. My name is Ibrahim Sani. Have a good one.